Major funding for these programs has been provided by grants from Chase Commercial Term Lending and M&T Bank, Genova Burns, Giantomasi and Webster, Capital One Bank, the Wickoff Group, New York Community Bank, Greenberg Traurig, Perfect Building Maintenance, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company. Additional funding is provided by grants from Aerial Property Advisors, AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Colliers International NYC, Cushman & Wakefield, Customers Bank, CUNY TV Foundation, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, First Nationwide Title Insurance Agency, Flushing Bank, Friedman, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, Herrick Feinstein, Hersha Hospitality Trust, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Chairman, USRealty.com, John Katsimides, Red Apple Group, Margolin Weiner and Evans, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, New Banks, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, People's United Bank, RBS Citizens Bank, SJP Properties, Sterling and Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, The Continuum Company, Urban American, and these friends.
You know, these kids, you know, they grow up in the iron-bound section of Newark. You know, they work in these variety of jobs, working, raincoats, delivering funeral homes. They go to college, and then, you know, what do? They figure I'll be a school teacher. Then they want to be a litigator. Then I want to be a real estate attorney. Then I want to get involved with politics. Who knows what he wants to do? But I'm really lucky to truly have a friend, my friend Frank Giantomasi, who's a senior partner at Genova, Burns, Giantomasi, and Webster.
Perfect.
Thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure, Michael.
So let's talk about the grandparents. You know, each one of them has some unique characteristics. Tell me about your mother's side first.
My mother's side is typical Italian immigration, and her father, my mother was born in 1914, her father was brought here by a family that was in the town that made soap. And they had taught my grandfather how to read the formulas to make the soaps. And so when they had a little business here, they needed help. My grandfather on my mother's side comes around 1910.
And where did they come from
My
Italy?
grandfather, on my mother's side, came from the province of Avellino and from a small town called Gesualdo.
Grandpa was an entrepreneur and came over a couple of times. He came over, he comes back, he leaves, he brings another relative, and then he finally... So tell me about
my grandfather, Salvatore Giantomasi, was a peasant. I always marvel when I look at the manifest that was his self-declared position in life. And he came in 1892, worked, went back in 96, came back with brothers, worked, went in 02 and came back in 02 with his wife that he married on one of the trips and with his daughter that he had never seen, and with my grandmother pregnant with my father, who then was born in January of 1903 in Newark, New Jersey.
So, you know, many people, they came over from Ellis Island. How'd they end up in Newark? You know, people, you know, I haven't never really heard of how people ended up in Newark.
Well, both of my grandparents on both sides of the family came as a result of being summoned, as a result of some people that started businesses in Newark that needed help. And, you know, the language was an issue, and the way they did business culturally was an issue. So letters were written, and both of my grandparents were summoned to come to America. And they both came through Ellis Island. We've got all those manifests, and it's very interesting to follow. And then they both found their way to Newark, New Jersey, which was a big, big immigration port for Italian Americans in the 90s and in the 10s and in the 20s.
And they ended up, people know of Ironbound. What's the Ironbound section?
The Ironbound section is a sociological phenomena because it's surrounded on all sides by railroad tracks. So Ironbound. It's the easternmost portion of Newark. The closest city to it is Jersey City and then New York City. And it was as I was growing up there, Mike, it was, if I can familiarize you with a reference to the Bronx Tale, that was the picture of the Ironbound.
You had a candy store?
Candy stores.
Stoop ball?
Everybody played stoop ball, yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So tell me, how did your father meet your mother? Was this an arranged marriage? Or?
No, it was not an arranged marriage. My father was 11, 12 years older than my mother and was a neighborhood fellow. His father had some ethnic stores, what I'd call Italian bodegas of the time, and my mother was a younger woman, and she was pretty much infatuated with him. That's how the story goes, and the story goes that she chased him for years, and then finally they got married.
Now, you said to me your grandfather, your father's father, was a peasant, but he then started opening up these stores and buying some real estate. And he had like 4 or 5 before the Depression, right?
Yes, before the Depression, he was doing well, which I think was the story generally in America. I mean, there was a boom time, and apparently he had an entrepreneurial spirit, and he came over as a handyman and horse and buggy guy, and started to deliver vegetables and fruits, and then started to open little stores that were Italian specialty stores that catered to the ethnic nature of the fabric of Newark.
Now, your father's born in 1914, right?
1903.
1903. And in 1903, so does he work for his father?
He worked for his father and had what looked like a pretty nice life. And it looked like he worked pretty hard and diligent. And things were doing well until around 29 when the Great Depression hit. And then there was a lot of sadness in our family because my grandfather lost the stores, lost the properties he had bought. He had actually bought property in South Orange, New Jersey.
Ooh.
Yeah, that was a big jump to move his family to a more Italian rural setting, to get out of the city of Newark. But that dream never materialized, and the entire family collapsed into one building that's still in my family. I still own it, and one store. And a lot of people lived in
the building over there. Now, you said to me one of the interesting things which has had an effect on your life of politics is your father got involved with the Republican politics like really early when he was young.
Very early. He became a campaign worker. He became ultimately he became the ward chairman for the Republican Party, the East Ward. Newark has 5 wards, like the boroughs of Manhattan. So he would be the equivalent of the Manhattan or the Bronx chairman of the party, and that was his job for a while. And then that ultimately led to him getting what was a civil service job with the creation of the Newark Housing Authority, which was a creature of the first Italian mayor of Newark. His name was Ralph Villani, and my father was a campaign manager, and that's how he went into that business, that line of business, and he stayed there for over 30 years. He retired out of the Newark Housing Authority.
Now, Mom was doing what? You said your mother worked at Sealand and other?
She started out in small jobs. She was a shampoo girl at a beauty shop and a waitress, and then she ultimately was very, very proud that her little typing skills, she had a couple of years of high school and learned how to type, and her typing skills got her to a quasi-secretary photocopy job at Sealand, and she put in a number of years there and retired with a nice pension from Sealand.
Now, your sister was born before. She's like 14 years older than you.
Yes, my sister's 14, 15 years older than I am.
Okay, so let's talk. Little Frank is born in Ironbound, in the house that the family was in.
Yes.
With all over there. And you go to public school, right?
Yes, public school, Newark, Lafayette Street School, Eastside High School.
And you stay in Ironbound.
Never leave.
You never leave Ironbound. But you said to me the change that happened on you had the effect on Newark were the riots.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you were like, what, 14 at this time?
Yes, I was.
14 years of age, and these major riots. What happened?
Well, you know, in the summer of '67, the summer of discontent, just like a lot of large cities in America, Newark erupted. And there was 6 days of violence, mayhem, chaos, murder, deaths. The National Guard came in. You've seen all the specials. We just celebrated a big anniversary. And it changed the city, and it changed the city that I grew up in dramatically. I mean, after 67, between 67 and 74, there was about a 40% exodus of residents in the city of Newark. That's a deflation that's hard to imagine. It's, you know, so people talk about it's like a Hiroshima type of an event that the city just almost evaporated. Our mayor went to jail. Many of the city council people went to jail. So you had the riots combined with a series of indictments, and the city really
Right,
changed.
and Newark really died, as one would say. I mean,
It's-
you had, as we were talking when we got together the other day, you had two major department stores. You had three. You had Orbach's.
Yes.
You had Haynes.
Yes.
You Bamberger's.
Yep.
And you had Klein's. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Newark was. Somebody told me, one of my past guests, Marvin Josephson, they used to have in Newark, when he was with CBS, they had Wednesday night was the Bamberger's parade for Thanksgiving, and Thursday was the Macy's parade.
That's correct.
So Newark was a vibrant area.
Yeah.
But now what was interesting was Ironbound stayed good.
Yes. After the riots, which were in the central ward, so Newark, the Ironbound would be to the east, the evacuation occurred in many of the wards. But what happened was that as the Italian population moved out of the Ironbound, Portugal in 1974 had a revolution and it became a communist country. So Portugal had an exodus of people, business people, that were having their businesses nationalized and taken over. And they came to a port area which had a small population of Portuguese. So as the city vacated, the Ironbound populated. And the Italian exodus led to the arrival of Portuguese men and women with a business experience that went into the Jewish merchant stores that were leaving Goldfingers and Feinbergs, and went into the small Italian restaurants, Santa Lucia's and things like that. And all of a sudden, the names Seabra and Coutinho and Ferreira began to appear, and it became a rebirth of an ethnic area, of an ethnic population that was a new immigration. But it was an immigration that was in the mid-70s.
And you were there for this vibrant thing because, and you've been involved with Ironbound, which
Yeah.
we'll talk about for many years. So tell me about some of the jobs when you were going to public school.
Well, I worked in a tailor shop. I would go and get the iron hangers that would fall behind the presses, and I'd wend my way to get the hangers. I worked in a funeral parlor. The funeral parlor was the family business that summoned my grandfather in 1892.
Right, he did the cabinetry for them.
Yeah,
at that
yeah.
time.
My grandfather worked for them. He was a good handyman, and I would pull bear or I would work the doors at wakes. I sold some raincoats for a long time. My uncle was a big buyer at Bamberger's, and when Bamberger's fell on difficult times, he retired, but he kept the raincoat business going. So I learned how to sell schmatas, as my grandfather.
Now, as you said to me, your father, who was involved with Republican politics, always said to you, Frank, you're going to be a lawyer. Why? What was this?
He was an 8th grade educated man, and he felt that lawyers and the legal education was the most flexible type of education that you could get. And he would say to me, you know, you need to understand business, you need to understand the law, but being a lawyer doesn't mean you have to be a lawyer. You can be anything you want. You could buy property, you could manage property, you could go into business. So he just thought that it was the epitome of a well-prepared education because of the flexibility it had. And I guess in my experience, in my life, it led me to a fine career and to be a good support for the family, but it's also let me be a little entrepreneurial.
Now, you graduated high school and you really wanted to go to Georgetown, you said, but then there was a health problem with your father or mother?
Yeah, my dad was 52 when I was born, and by the time I was ready for college, he was 70. This was before stents and before angioplasties, and he had a little difficult time with the heart, and my mother persuaded me to not go away. I had been accepted to universities in Washington and stay home, and I went to St. Peter's College in Jersey City, a Jesuit institution.
Now, when you were there, you were also working, and you know, you knew that you wanted to go to law school, but the entrepreneur in you became a substitute teacher.
Yeah, in New Jersey at that time, you didn't have to have a college degree to be a substitute teacher. All you needed were 90 credits. So I got those 90 credits as quickly as I could, and I began to work, because in Newark we had split sessions. So you could kind of get into a school and teach from 7:30 till about 12:30, and almost fill in a complete day, and then go take your classes in the afternoon or at night. And that's the model that I followed through college and through law school.
Right, so you graduate college, and then you apply to law school, also in New Jersey, Seton Hall.
Right in Newark. Yep.
Newark.
Yep.
And there you said it was very interesting, because you were able to, since Seton Hall had law school during the day and night,
Yep.
you were able to support your law school by being a substitute teacher.
Yes, yeah, and I worked 5 days a week. I'd get into the high school. I was a social studies teacher. I was licensed, and I would almost like what they would call a permanent substitute. I'd have a regiment. I'd fill in on a long-term basis, and most people thought I was a teacher and didn't understand that I was actually a teacher masquerading as a law student. But I didn't want to stretch that education out as a night student, so I would take night classes, a lot of summer classes. So like we were chatting about, it was a lot of work. But
So you graduated law school, and very few people would realize that you were a litigator. Why do you like litigation?
I was lucky enough to be accepted by the chief judge of Essex County. His name was Arthur Blake at the time. He was called the assignment judge. It was a pretty exclusive clerkship, and he was a litigator, and it was a litigation clerkship. So my preparation in law school and my preparation with the clerkship just put me in that vein. So after the clerkship, I went to work for a larger firm, and I started trying cases day one. What happened, Mike, was a weird thing, was that because the Ironbound, where I still lived, was a changing neighborhood, there was just a lot of trades going on in business and in real estate, as I alluded to before, with this Portuguese immigration continuing. I graduated law school in '79, and the population was exploding. There was also a big earthquake in the Azores, and a lot of people continue to come out of Portugal now post-revolution because of the earthquake, the displacement. So people would come to me, and even though I was a litigator, I was presented with many opportunities to represent good, solid people buying and selling businesses and homes, and that led to a career.
A lawyer who's an entrepreneur, I mean, you got involved with the cable TV,
Yes.
Portuguese cable TV. How did you do involved?
Well, I began to travel for different clients to Portugal, and I would be in Portugal 4 or 5 times a year, and some people even thought I was Portuguese because I began to pick up the language, and then opportunities presented itself. And amongst other things, I became an investor and a principal owner in a Portuguese cable television station, Portuguese ethnic newspaper, the Portuguese Post, and I also did production of international soccer games, which would focus on Portuguese championship teams, Benfica, Porto, against teams from Brazil, Vasco da Gama, and in '85, I think we produced the largest crowd in North America for a game of the Portuguese national champion Benfica against Vasco da Gama of Brazil.
Now, in addition to that, the Portuguese, you also got involved, and you were a founder of a bank.
Yes, in late '85, I invested with some other men from the community, and we founded something called Ironbound Bank, which in '85, when the charter was issued, was the largest capitalized bank in the history of New Jersey. An interesting thing. It just showed you the number of people and the desire to capture that market, which was the Ironbound market, which, you know, a lot of restaurants, a lot of business, a lot of activity.
And you
So
grew
it's
the bank, and then you sold it to
We sold the bank to Richmond County.
which was Staten Island, who
Yep.
wanted to come out into New Jersey.
Exactly right. And then they sold it not too long after that to Independence, and now it's Garden State, New York State.
So what happens is this: you leave the firm that you had started, and you and yourself, you go out on your own, and then something happens with the county.
Yes.
Okay, because you were always a Republican, and one day, what happens at the county? Because that was truly a turning point in your career.
For me, it was a big turning point. You're right, Michael. In '92, the county executive, who was a Democrat, he was embroiled in a battle with the courts over relocating and building courts. And 3 weeks before a Supreme Court case, I got a call from the county executive to come in, and he said, you know, we've got all these litigators handling this battle with the courts, and the battle is about really real estate. And I've just realized that we need a real estate attorney to argue this case. And you have a background as a litigator, but you know real estate, and you're immersed in real estate. And on 2 weeks, 3 weeks preparation, I substituted in and took over the case and went to the Supreme Court of New Jersey and argued it, and it became a landmark case. And it involved actually a Harts Mountain building, and the courts were ordered the county to lease, but we wound up winning, creating a novel approach to create a commercial condominium so that the county could buy the courts and build forever.
In part of the building.
Exactly right.
So that's 1992, and so tell me about those years, because you were involved with a lot of condemnation, the stadium, other things that you got involved. Talk about those years.
Well, I became the chief counsel to the Essex County Board of Freeholders, and then 10, 11 years later, I became the county counsel, which is the chief lawyer. During my positions, a lot of things happened in Newark. Newark began its rebirth. There was the Devil's Arena, which is the Prudential Center, and I began to represent many of the landowners that were being condemned to build that. Also, I represented the county doing condemnation to build the Newark Bears baseball stadium, which opened at that time.
You know, as you said, when the riots took place in '67, Newark literally stayed like the dust. Nothing had happened for years. And then the resurrection. A lot of the resurrection was due to Ray Chambers.
Absolutely.
Okay, Ray Chambers really wanted to create Newark, okay? And, you know, Raymond Boulevard and everything, he was there. I mean, the PAC, the Prudential Center, and all these.
The PAC was an ignition switch, and Ray Chambers, with his great philanthropy, with fellows like Mark Burson and others, got together. At that time, Mayor Sharp James appointed me to be part of the minority oversight construction crew to make sure that as the PAC was built, it became the largest minority project in the history of New Jersey. So I had that exposure and that experience. So I worked for the county. I had a private law firm. It was a real estate-centric law firm. I worked very diligently at the real estate because the opportunity was tremendous, Michael. Newark was starting to be reborn.
So when was what would you say, when was the true reborn? Okay, a lot of people, you know, because of the publicity or the promotion that Cory Booker did, everybody thought that he was involved. He was definitely involved, but a lot of that was taking place definitely way before him because of the Ray Chambers and the situation. And Prudential was always Newark.
Before Cory Booker became mayor, Ray Chambers had completed and opened the Performing Arts Center, which is a landmark location. Before Cory became mayor, the Newark Bears baseball stadium opened. And as Cory was being inaugurated, the steel was going up for the Devil's Arena.
So all of these things were pre-Cory?
Yeah, I mean, yes. And one of the great things that Cory did, now Senator Booker, was when that arena opened, when the Prudential Center opened with 200 nights of entertainment a year, he made sure that it was a safe venue, that it was a secure venue, and now it's become, I think it's one of the most used venues in America.
No question, one of the best. So what happens in 2010? You know, you left politics?
Well, 2005, 2006, I retired from the county positions because 14 years my personal business was growing. And I had met along the way a great fellow by the name of Angelo Genova, good litigator, great labor lawyer, handled the Lautenberg decision and many other great decisions. And we thought that it was an opportunity for Angelo to relocate his firm to Newark.
Right, Angelo was in Livingston.
Yes, he was.
And kid from Newark was always Newark.
Always.
And you know, it was really an insightful thing for guys to say, we're making a commitment to Newark, and you and Angelo merge your firms.
While I was county counsel, Angelo was the chief labor counsel. Our friendship and our professional admiration grew, And we saw an opportunity as these things were developing that you alluded to, that perhaps we could go against the tide. And as law firms had left Newark to go to Roseland and Livingston, Morristown, that we would do something different. We would combine his great Livingston firm with my very substantial Newark firm and make a new law firm.
And with regard to that, I mean, you've been in the Renaissance now. I mean, some of the things that you and the firm have done over the last couple of years are the major effects taking place in Newark. I mean, for the fact that Panasonic relocated to Newark, that was one of the major developments that you guys have been involved with.
Yeah, I mean, we did we were Chief Redevelopment Counsel, Chief Labor Counsel for Matrix and Steve Pizicki building and luring Panasonic, which is opened, and it's an iconic building. We did the first hotel in Newark in 40 years. The Marriott for Tucker Development out of Chicago. These are substantial, developments.
Right, and now you're also representing Prudential.
That's correct. We've got the steel up, and we're about to top off. And Prudential is building its world financial headquarters in the old area where Klein's was and across the street from Haynes. And they're taking, buildings and locations that have been dead and dormant.
And you're also involved with some of your clients in Whole Foods. Who would think Whole Foods would be coming to Newark?
Whole Foods is moving into the Haynes building. Hanini and L&M from New York have joint ventured, and they've got the lease signed, and that's a great experience because downtown living needs to be supported.
No question. And then, besides Newark, you've stretched over there. I mean, for 45 years, the old Hemsley site in Fort Lee was vacant, and you're involved in that on both sides of the.
We are Chief Development Counsel for Tucker Development. That's $500 million on the Tucker side, and I was there yesterday with Richard from Chicago, and Tishman's got the piers done and the footings and the steel's going to be attached to the new concrete. It's really exciting in Fort Lee.
So let's talk a little bit about the family. Your father said become a lawyer. You said this to your kids, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about your sons and your daughter and your wife.
Well, my wife is a professional educator. She was a teacher and a chairwoman and a vice principal, and then she retired as a deputy superintendent of schools. And both my children, my daughter, who's 33.
Her name?
Gemma. She's an attorney, and she practices with us, and she's a very good real estate attorney.
She's married?
Married with a 15-month-old Nicholas.
Nicholas?
Hopefully little Luke will be born in the next 3 weeks.
And your son?
Unmarried, living a great life in Hoboken, also a lawyer and a litigator, and also
his name is?
He's Frank Jr.
Frank Jr. Right.
Yeah. We're Italians. We have to can't use too many names.
No. I agree, and at least you've kept them up there, and you've been involved with charities. I mean, a number of major charities. You've been involved with the community a lot.
I've been a big community supporter because I've always believed that as goes Newark goes my business, and so we've always done what we could to support in a philanthropic way. Look, I'm a Title I baby. My mom and dad paid $35 a month rent. We never owned a home until very, very late in my life with my mom and dad, and I know the benefits of being a Title I child in Newark Public Schools. I got to go to the Empire State Building because of federal subsidies. I got to see the Bolshoi Ballet. It was landmark for me as a kid to see that. And I believe that if you just don't help, you just won't get anything done. So we try to help all we can.
And I'm so happy you've been my guest today. Thank you.
It's great. Thank you so much, Michael, for the opportunity.